I feel it's the right time for us to have a conversation about Alejandro Garnacho. Not because of what happened against Forest, far from it, but more a wider chat about his development over the last couple of seasons and just my honest opinion on Garnacho heading into a summer where change is going to be sweeping throughout Ruben Amorim's squad. Let me explain a few things about Garnacho from both sides that I think need to be discussed. Let's be totally honest, ladies and gents, we could have had this conversation about Alejandro Garnacho or lots of other United players earlier this season. But I feel like it's important to try and see how the season pans out, see whether there's any changes before we do have that chat. But now is the time. I want you to let me know in the comments, right? What's your honest opinion on Garnacho, on the season he is having, and on what United do next season? I'm going to run through a few things, and an important point I want to speak about when it comes to age and experience. Because some United fans will literally say, Garnacho's 20, you can't talk about him. I don't really think that is the case. But Garnacho has had an extremely indifferent season, as has Manchester United, as has Rasmus Højlund, as has every attacking player. So don't look at this as a witch hunt against Garnacho. It's far from that, so please don't try and label me like that. But this is a player who was dropped by Ruben Amorim for the squad against Man City, as was Marcus Rashford, because they weren't doing enough in training. Whether it was enough in training, they weren't doing enough to impress their new manager. Ahmad showing them how it was done when it comes to that game. But Garnacho came back into the team. And Garnacho, just like Højlund did, went on a run of, 20 plus games without scoring a goal? And in this last week, we've seen just a continuation of the frustrations of Garnacho this season. Now, here's an example of a shot he was having against Forest. I think he had 6 shots against Forest. I don't think any of them were on target. So many shots blocked over the top, ignoring runs on the overlap. And speaking after the game, Amorim was talking about the improvements that we need to see from Garnacho. And the big important one there, and this is the big thing with Garnacho, it's about decision-making, right? And if you fast forward to the game against City, that was just one example. It was the clear example of, I wouldn't really say that was the decision-making. That was just, was it unlucky? It was just poor anticipation. I'm not really sure what it was, but it was bad, right? And Amorim, speaking ahead of the derby, was speaking about Højlund and Xerxes and Garnacho and all. And as I said, this is a problem that has existed all season long with every player. It's not a witch hunt against an individual in Garnacho. But something that I've found, disingenuous is the wrong word, right? But there's United fans that will talk about Garnacho and just come at you saying, Sam, he's 20. We can't possibly have a conversation about Garnacho, about anything to do with him. He's still young, he's still developing, and that is all completely correct. But I see 2 20-year-old lads here, right? I see one player who's played 3 or 4 games for United. And I see another player who's played in excess now of 100 games for Manchester United's first team. And I don't know why I'm going to go with this analogy, but it's almost like when you leave uni and you want to apply for a job. And some people have got experience when they apply for it because they didn't go to uni. They got experience. I don't know why this analogy is coming to my head, but it kind of makes sense. I don't think it does, actually. I'm going to back out of that. I think sometimes analogies make sense, sometimes they don't. I'm very good at that. The point I want to make is that I don't look at Garnacho as an average 20-year-old just broken through from the academy player anymore. I see somebody who's in his 3rd season in a Manchester United shirt who, I'm sorry, just simply hasn't developed his game this season. And development is what is needed because Ruben Amorim has come in. Ruben Amorim is a new manager. Now, Garnacho is being asked, and this is why I said before he kicked a ball under Ruben Amorim, I was concerned about Garnacho's style of play because in the Amorim system, the width does not come from the number 10s. It comes from the overlapping fullbacks, and the number 10s use those runs and cut inside, and they're more gifted naturally, technically, in central positions, in tight positions, quick triangles, quick movements, and also with the ability to cut inside and score goals. Garnacho's natural game is using the touchline, holding width, running a defender with pace. Now, of course, that's going to be an element of the number 10, but in terms of development, And I thought we saw some parts of development from Garnacho this season when it comes to understanding how to play in more central positions, but simply not enough, certainly not with the end product. Now, as I said, I can have equal conversations about how Højlund hasn't developed this season, about how pretty much every attacker that we've got hasn't developed this season. So you could say that Garnacho is a product of his environment. But I'm mad concerned about his decision-making, man. And maybe this does stem back to still coming through as being a youth team player, because he was the big fish in a small pond when he was in that FA Youth Cup team. It was get the ball to Garnacho and let him make all the difference. But again, if I pull up this, right, and I speak about how Dorgu and Garnacho have been playing down that left-hand side, I think Garnacho has probably used about, I don't know as a percentage, 85 to 90% of Dorgu's runs as a distraction. Rather than using the overlap to pass to Dorgu to get the cutback, it's using Dorgu's run to drag the defender away from Garnacho so that he can then cut inside and find a shot. Perfect example, actually, is this here. But that's not leading to an end product. So that's where Ruben Amorim is speaking about the decision-making process. Sometimes cutting inside is going to be the right thing to do, but not 9 times out of 10. Use the runs of Dorgu, because the results are not coming. The end product is not coming. And I've said this multiple times, and I'll say it again. I just can see Garnacho being one of the players that Manchester United are considering selling this summer in order to fund the purchase of someone else. I can just see it. I don't know if I'm going to be right or wrong. And you could say this about, I don't think there's, Bruno Fernandes is untouchable. I would say Lenny Yoro is. I would personally put Kobe in that category. But there really aren't many players inside this category. Of course, Dorgu, because we just signed him. But other than that, the overwhelming majority of this United squad are up for sale. And I just haven't seen enough development, enough personal development, enough decision-making development, and enough end product from Alejandro Garnacho this season to consider him untouchable. And having been dropped for that game against City, I thought Garnacho showed some improvement, especially in the work rate and coming back. And that's something that Amorim's pointed out. But when it comes to the final product, when it comes to the decision-making, that's where Garnacho still is stalling. And yeah, I just don't think it's simple enough to look at Garnacho and say, he's 20. He gets a hall pass. Can't say anything against him. I don't think that's the case, because this is a player who has played over 100 times for our first team now. I want you to let me know. This is, again, not a witch hunt. Someone can label it like that if you want. Apologise for that crap analogy. Thought it was good, and it wasn't. But what's your honest take on Garnacho this season, and what can happen with him next season? Because it's just like watching United. It's been frustrating watching him.